Hello. I'm Sally, your host. Welcome to the third board, my master's chess channel. Here I will show you games from great players of the past, and other chess-related content. For today's video, my master has chosen an instructive game of the Soviet-Latvian Grandmaster, Mikhail, played in 1958, Portoroz, Slovenia. This game was part of the strong Portoroz International Chess Tournament of 1958. His opponent was Laszlo Szabo, a strong Hungarian grandmaster. Szabo succeeded Gallagher, and was himself succeeded by Lajos Portoroz in the 1960s as the top player of that country. So, let's begin. Laszlo Szabo has white pieces and starts with pawn to e4. Mikhail plays pawn to c5, the Sicilian defense characteristic move, and after knight to f3, pawn to d6, bishop to b5 check. We have on this board the Moscow variation, also called Kanal Sokolsky attack. It is used sometimes nowadays, to avoid the heavy theory of the main lines of the Sicilian defense. White aims for simplification and fast kingside development. The three main responses for black in this position are knight to c6, knight to d7, or the move employed in the game, bishop to d7. It is also the most common response for black, and allows the exchange of light square bishops. The game continues with bishop takes bishop check, queen takes bishop. In this position, white's most common moves are pawn to c4, making black's d5 more difficult, and castles, a more quiet variation, and also the move played in the game. The game continues with knight to c6, c3, preparing d4, knight to f6, rook to e1, e6, d4, c takes on d4, c takes on d4, pawn to d5. And this is the Moscow variation's main line position, many times seen in Grandmaster games. The game continues with e5, knight to e4, knight to c3. Instead of knight to c3, another popular response for white is knight from b to d2. In both cases, black usually exchanges knights. If white played knight to d2, after knight takes knight, white would retake the piece with the c1 bishop. The game continues with knight takes on c3, b takes on c3. Take a look at the resulting position. It is very similar to a French defense position, but black does not have the notorious light square bishop locked in c8. Stockfish evaluates this position as equal. The game continues with bishop to e7, preparing to castle's kingside. Instead of this move, Stockfish suggests to play knight to a5, opening the queen-bishop file to explore the weak c3 pawn. It also prepares to move the knight on c4. Let's return to the game. White plays knight to g5, starting an attack on the king side. h6, trying to expel the annoying knight. Queen to h5, pinning the rook file pawn. Bishop takes on g5, eliminating the knight, but losing black's only, and good bishop. Instead of bishop takes on g5, another good move for black was pawn to g6, trying to expel the queen. Let's continue the game. White plays bishop takes on g5, retaking the piece, and preventing black from castling queenside. Knight to e7, blocking the diagonal, making possible to castle's queenside, and preparing to move the knight to f5. Instead of knight to e7, another good move for black was rook to c8, preparing to put pressure on the c3 pawn. Castling kingside here would be a mistake for black. The game could have continued like this. Bishop takes on h6. G takes on h6. Rook to e3. f5. Rook to g3 check. King to h8. If black played king to h7, white would respond with rook to g6. And white would be much better. Let's return to the variation. Queen takes on h6 check. Queen to h7. Queen takes on e6. And white would be better. Let's return to the game. After knight to e7, white continues with bishop to d2. Retreating the bishop, and reinforcing c3. It was better to take the knight according to Stockfish. Castle's king side. Instead of this move, it was better to play rook to c8. White plays a4. Apparently Szabo wants to make difficult for black to play pawn to b5. However, even now, black could play pawn to b5 without problems. The game could continue like this. Pawn takes pawn. Rook from f to b8. There's no hurry to retake the pawn. Queen to g4. Threatening bishop takes on h6. Knight to f5. Rook to a6. Rook takes on b5. And the position would be equal. Let's return to the game. After a4, black continues with pawn to f5. f4. Rook from a to c8. It was better to advance the pawn to b6, before white plays a5. White continues with rook from e to b1. Rook to c4. Attacking the a4 pawn. Queen to d1. Advancing the pawn to a5 was also good. Rook from f to c8. a5. Knight to c6. Queen to b3. White makes use of the queen's knight file, while black pressures on the queen's bishop file. Which one will blink first? Black continues with rook to c7. Defending the b7 pawn. Rook b2. Take a look at this position. It seems the queen side is locked and no side has an advantage. The b7 pawn is well defended, and it is very difficult for white to explore it. At the same time, black's queen and the c2 rook must remain in the second rank to defend it. White cannot move his a1 rook either, or would lose the a pawn. Black could put more pressure on c3 by advancing the pawn to a6, and moving the knight to b5 through a7. However, this maneuver would weaken the b6 square, and white pieces could use it to invade black's position. There is only one black piece not compromised in the queen side. Black continues with king to h7, probably preparing the advance of kingside pawns. h3, preparing pawn to g4. White has ambitions in the kingside too. a6. Black could also had played queen to f7. Queen to b6. Knight to e7. Queen to d6. Black cannot take the queen, because of the fork after pawn takes queen. Another good move for white was queen to a7, aiming for a draw by repetition. The game could have continued like this. Queen to c8. Queen to b6. Queen to d7. Queen to a7. And black would do better by accepting the draw. In order to avoid this, black could try rook from c4 to c6. And after that, the game could continue like this. Queen to b3. Queen to e8. Queen to c2. Knight to c8. g4. Queen to f7. Pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. But the position would be equal according to the wise fish. Let's return to the game. After queen to d6, black continues with queen to e8. Rook to b6. Rook from c4 to c6. Rook takes on c6. Queen takes on c6. Rook to b1. Rook to d7. Queen to b4. Knight to c8. g4. Laszlo Szabo continues to put pressure on Mikhail Tal's position. He now threatens to open the kingside, and move his queen to f8. Black continues with g6. Defending f5. Queen to f8. White is preparing to open the king's knight's file, and occupy it with his rook. If Szabo can coordinate his rook with the queen on that file, black's position would become compromised. Black tries to defend against it. Rook to g7. Black also aligns the rook with the white king. King to f2. Leaving the knight's file. It also frees space for the white rook. Queen to c4. The black queen threatens to go to a2 or d3. And here we come to an interesting position of the game. According to the engine, right now there is no side with advantage. What should white play next? I have chosen 3 candidate moves. White can play G takes on f5. He also can play king to e3, avoiding queen to d3 and protecting the bishop. And, finally, white can play Rook to b2, defending the bishop and avoiding queen to a2. According to the wise fish, only one of these moves is the best one. The other two will bring advantage to black. In the game, Laszlo Szabo made the wrong choice, and after that, fortune smiled to Mikhail. Can you find the best move for white? Did you like this game so far? I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want notifications of more content like this, please subscribe to this channel. I shall narrate this game's conclusion in the next video. Thank you, and see you again in part 2. Goodbye.